Hi there, everybody. Thank you for joining today's AOP webinar. My name is Kelly Barner, and I'm going to be your host and moderator for today's conversation. So today's topic actually brings us very close to one of the hottest things being discussed in procurement right now, and that is orchestration. Now, we're going to take a very specific focus. We're going to look at what's involved with augmenting P2P or procure-to-pay and ERP, enterprise resource planning, when you bring in intake orchestration and AI, the other biggest topic anywhere right now. Now, we're going to be looking at what orchestration means when we look at it in the context of the whole tech stack. So it's the difference between using something that can fill a need versus something that was specifically designed to do that. And I think most importantly, we're going to leave the realm of the hypothetical and we're going to talk about some specific use cases that show how orchestration is being used to change processes as well as workflows for the better. Now, before I introduce and bring in my two guests today, I want to give you a quick orientation to your screen. If you've ever been to an Art of Procurement webinar or virtual event before, you know you're not off the hook. You have a role you need to play today too. We have a nice big chat panel up the right-hand side of your screen. We welcome comments. We welcome questions. I will be keeping an eye on that as we go through today's session, not necessarily holding a block of time at the end for Q&A, but looking to see what your thoughts and reactions are as we go through the conversation. The other thing that you'll see underneath this video is a little emoji button. If you don't necessarily have something specific to say or a question to ask, we've got applauses, we've got thumbs up, we've got hearts, all kinds of things. Thank you very much. So please feel free to let our speakers know how you feel as we go through the conversation. Now, without further ado, I want to tell you who we're going to be talking to today. I'm glad to welcome two speakers. We have Jonathan Fehring. He's a principal in Procurement and Purchase-to-Pay Advisory at the Hackett Group, as well as Sagi Eliyahu. He is the co-founder and CEO of Tonkean. So let me bring both Jonathan and Sagi on screen, and we will get today's conversation underway. Hi, Sagi. Hi, Jonathan. How are you both doing today?
Doing great. Thank you for having us.
Very good.
Excellent. Well, Jonathan, I believe this is your first AOP webinar, so you're on the hook first. This is a question we ask in every podcast interview, and we usually start our events this way as well. But the question is, did you find procurement or did procurement find you?
You know, I think it was a little bit of both. My background is actually in finance. I started my career with some of the largest banks, JP Morgan, Citi, Fifth Third, and was doing financial analysis and data analysis, securities analysis, and I wasn't not happy, but I knew it wasn't something that I was going to be able to do long term. I had always had a knack for negotiating things. My older brother would come to me when negotiating new job offers. My sister-in-law would come to me when, making some kind of big purchase. And I would always like to embarrass my wife, then fiance, when buying anything really large. So the last time we bought a bunch of new furniture for our house, she just left and told me, "Look, I'll see you in the car." she couldn't deal with the back and forth and the playing on what they wanted to hear versus what you really wanted. So, and at the time, I really didn't know much about procurement or that it could even, this kind of skill could be a career. Mm. It really didn't hit me until, going on 15 years ago when I was getting married in the Bahamas and we were walking through one of those open air street markets. Oh, yeah. I spent like 1 to 2 hours just haggling with the street vendors, and I just had a blast. And yes, my now wife was very much embarrassed. So when I got home, I started doing some research. I joined a small management consulting firm focused on, category management, strategic cost takeout, SRM, and I really was hooked. And that led me to joining Hackett almost 7 years ago now.
Well, that's fantastic. And to your earlier point, doing okay in finance, but why be not completely happy with your role when you could work in procurement? So we're glad that you found us. We're glad to have you. Sagi, same question to you. Did you find procurement or did procurement find you?
Well, definitely procurement found me, but I would say, Jonathan, you just made me realize that, so I'm originally from Israel. I've been living in the US for more than 10 years now, but in Israel, negotiating in the street fair is a national skill for us. This is additional pride. So I definitely can relate there. But procurement found me in a way that I think some of the part of the topic here today of the orchestration. So we started the company almost 9 years ago with the idea of process orchestration before it was a word that anyone understood. And I think procurement in the last few years have had such a big maturity jump in technology and understanding. I think a lot of it was the general things happening in the world that kind of help put the focus on it. But either way, in the last 2-3 years, we started to see procurement rising up. We've been working with finance team, we've been working with legal team, we've been working with IT team. So we've touched procurement use cases in the past, but in the last 2 years, it really became clear that is a focus area of focus for us. Yeah. And spend the last 2-3 years a lot more deep diving into you guys' world, and it's an exciting one.
Well, just so that you know, once you're in procurement, we don't actually let you leave. So glad you both found your way here. Now you're stuck. Sagi, given how long you've been talking about orchestration, I'd be interested to hear how you explain what it means. Procurement, we're so bad, not only with our 3-letter acronyms or TLAs, but with our terminology, things like transformation. What does it really mean? I would love to hear how you talk about the concept and the benefits associated with the way you see orchestration playing out in practice.
I think, naming is probably the hardest and most important thing, because if it sticks, it needs to encapsulate both what the value of something is, but also what it does, and what it is. So it's quite complicated. I think where orchestration really took a leap is when actually people started talk about it in an intake orchestration type of duo. Now, I do think those are two different things, but I think together they make it even easier to understand the concept of orchestration. So maybe I'll start there for a second. So intake is the idea of collecting information. I think that's pretty straightforward. It's been something everyone do all the time. So in procurement, whether you get requests for sourcing, requests for purchasing, requests for new suppliers, whatever it is, those requests, intaking is the process of receiving those requests and the collection of information out of those requests. But as we all know, this is just the beginning of the process, right? And so now you need to go and have whatever approvals. Sometimes there's some prerequisites before you even want to start the official process, and that is a procurement own process, taking it from the initial request all the way to a purchase order, or to even sometimes to the invoicing part of it. But really, that path to resolution is not something that only procurement own. This is something that you need different departments, a lot of time a supplier from the outside, sometimes contractors, definitely the people requesting the help. As a back and forth. So all of this is not only a lot of coordination that needs to happen between all these different parties, but there's also different tools involved, different priorities involved. And I think that's like an important thing. The fact that it's very important to you doesn't mean that that's the top priority for this other person that you are, relying on. And so orchestration came from the idea that, like an orchestra, you need something to help, make the music come out nice, versus each of us doing like the wrong notes at the wrong time, and really trying to shepherd that process all the way. And it's the idea of aligning both the tools and the people and the processes and priorities. So it's not an integration idea. It's not like, oh, let's connect those two systems together. It's not a merely collaboration idea of, hey, let's have a chat or ability for us to chat together. It is the merit of a lot of different things that has one goal, which is aligning the process to the fastest and most frictionless resolution possible. So to me, like when I think about the intake and orchestration together, it's really just the life cycle that says, let's make sure we get all the information at the right way, at the right time, in the best experience possible. But then the orchestration is what takes it and all the way to resolution in the best way possible.
Yeah. Now, Jonathan, it seems only fitting given not only how complex and intertwined procurement is with all of the things going on in an enterprise, but also the increase in maturity we've seen over the last few years, that orchestration would be such a broad and powerful thing to bring into our tech stack. Can I have you, and whether it's orchestration generally or intake orchestration more specifically, can I have you put that into context for us a little bit in terms of the other trends that you're monitoring in procurement and procure to pay?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think surely, while intake and intake orchestration has been a fairly hot topic over the past couple of years, we get a lot of requests from our clients around, what does best practice look like? What are others doing? What tools are out there? What should the process look like? We get a lot of questions around there. But I think within the overall scope of procurement, there's a, increased need to do more with less. That's been a trend that we've been seeing in the last 3 to 4 years. Our key issue studies has identified, the amount of work coming into the procurement function year over year is increasing at like 8 to 10, 8 to 11%. When you look at budgets and FTEs to support all this additional work, it's really only rising at flat to 1, maybe 2%. And then this is where we really see this technology investment coming in, at a 5%, 8% growth year over year. So it's clear that organizations are looking for ways to make their employees, a bit more efficient. This typically comes into play by reducing some of these operational, some of these tactical work, like chasing down requesters, getting approvals, and they want to increase the amount of time spent doing stakeholder management, sourcing, negotiating, things of that nature, the higher value added activities. So we continue to see that trend play out. On the P2P side, we do a similar type of study, and look, stakeholder satisfaction and obtaining more value through the P2P process has been, in the top 3 over the past 4 studies. So we do it every other year. So since 2016, right? So there's a clear improvement here that stakeholder satisfaction needs to increase. The process definitely is top of mind for leaders.
Yeah. It's interesting because we sort of opened by talking about the fact that we have P2P, we have ERP, and they're great for what they're designed to do. We're not just here to pick on them, but a lot of companies end up, maybe Jonathan is part of that doing more with less kind of spirit and attitude. Procurement's very resourceful, but sometimes it means you're sort of banging the nail into the wall using the back of a screwdriver instead of the hammer. I mean, it'll work, but it's not really meant to happen that way. Sagi, from your experience, what are some of the either process or experience type challenges you tend to see when companies are trying to use ERP or P2P to sort of manage a process in a way that they were never designed to do?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's very common, probably too common. I think this is very natural behavior, for us just as people. And there's a lot of fear of change and bringing something new or sort of like staying true to an investment you already made. And that way trying to kind of push it to areas that it's not supposed to go. But I think the underlying result of it really does come down to adoption. So when you have an ERP or a P2P even, but that is very highly used and highly adopted within the procurement team or the finance team, or even some other stakeholders, you're assuming that it's working really well, and you're very excited about it, and you're very positively talking about it leadership wise and so on. But when you think about the rest of the world. With the world can be outside of the company, it can be inside of the company with the employees across the board. They need to be able to adopt your tools in order to follow your process. And what we found in the last 10 years, and this is bigger than procurement, but definitely in procurement as well, is that the table of kind of turned into how you get people to do things. Where it used to be very easy, 99% of companies would just use the stick. It's like, if
Yeah.
you want something to happen, this is the way to do it.
Yep.
I call it the DMV way. You go to the DMV. It's just, you have to do it the way, otherwise you can't drive. And if you drive without their permission, you go to jail. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So it's a very, very monopoly, on what can happen and what cannot happen. While on the consumer goods world, when you look outside, that completely changed, right? You go, so like the customer always right type of mentality,
Yeah.
and it's always your way, and you want to use your phone to pay, you want to use this, you want credit, it's all like your way. You're the client, and I think what happened in enterprise software in general in the last 10 years, but I think procurement is spearing that because there's so much similarities to the consumer, feeling
True.
of you go and trying to buy and trying to solve something, is that doesn't cut it anymore.
Yeah.
If I as an end user need to go and learn a new system, how to log in, how to fill, what does actually this means, what I need to fill this code, I don't even know what this code, what is this commodity code means, and so on and so forth. Like, those things does not actually end up something you can expect people to do. It has to end up with a better experience, something that guides you through it, and something that really just abstract that complexity away. So this is where a lot of companies end up adding that layer of orchestration, if we go back to the first question, to sort of like increase the usage of their own process by removing the need of people to use their systems directly.
Yeah. No, Jonathan, if I pull you in on that, because I think one of the other things we've seen a lot over the last 10 years, Sagi talked about sort of the mindset around almost consumer-like user experiences. But I also think we've seen this ongoing and constantly ebbing and flowing battle between, is it end-to-end platform or is it best of breed ecosystem that you've built out? And when we start to talk about not just adoption, but also implementation and the philosophy around tech that goes with the two different options for rolling things out, have you seen it make any difference from a workflow perspective, bringing in orchestration to a company that has taken that very straightforward end-to-end platform approach versus somebody that has maybe said, nope, we're going to build a highly customized, integrated, best of breed ecosystem with a bunch of different point solutions? Do you see differences, or is it really because you're layering orchestration at the front or on top, it actually doesn't matter as much which approach someone has taken?
Yeah, I do think it's interesting because I've really seen a lot of movement and just in terms of how companies are structuring their technology stack. I have some clients who swear by using a suite for integration purposes. I have others who realize that while some of the tools might do a great job on the downstream, P2P payables, their upstream tools are lacking, and there's a variety of reasons why a company could choose one or the other. I tend to lead towards the suite using downstream and best of breed approach for upstream, but we can have that dialogue. But look, many of the suites, many of the ERPs, they just don't have this purpose-built intake and workflow capabilities. And I can say the same about having purpose-built sourcing and CLM capabilities. They just don't have the maturity in some areas. So utilizing a best of breed type of solution to enhance the overall experience, both for your stakeholders and to make procurement's life a little bit easier. I think that makes a whole lot of sense, because ultimately most stakeholders don't like the process. It's too complex. They don't understand where it is. They don't understand the system. It takes too long. I mean, all of these different areas, it's the Amazon effect. It really is. It's that They want to know where it is in the process, how long it's going to take. They want to know, look, if it's going to be here in 2 days, it should be here in 2 days. It shouldn't be here in 2 weeks. I mean, it's that same kind of mentality that procurement's starting to, I think, realize a little bit more and be more forthcoming with, tools such as these kind of orchestration technologies.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point. And maybe to sort of transition to our second topic, let's start to put the procurement experience that we're creating, whether we realize it or not, we're creating an experience at sort of the center of this intake orchestration conversation. Jonathan, when you think about all the research you've done and read and all the conversations you've had, why is it from an ROI standpoint that procurement needs to be aware of and invest in the experience they're creating?
Yeah, I would say overall, improving the procurement experience, the interaction with procurement is only going to result in a higher overall ROI, right? If the stakeholder has a great experience with procurement, they're much more likely to consider them, a valued business partner and not just, a gatekeeper, administrator, a contracting, manager. This alone correlates to like a 2 to 3x savings in addition. There's also a direct correlation with how much spend under management and overall savings. So these types of tools can decrease things like maverick spend. So investing in these types of technologies, I do think, overall is going to drive all of these different metrics up.
Yeah. Now, Sagi, to go back to your point earlier about the stick, if procurement starts to focus on the experience we're creating and we're trying not to use the stick, how does something like intake orchestration allow us to be known for handing out carrots, right? What's the connection that you see, not just from process workflow management or data capture or any of those things? What's sort of the experiential value add associated with a well-implemented instance of intake orchestration?
Yeah, I think the point of the stick, right, is you can use the stick, right? And so in some areas in the process you can, right? In some areas of the process you can still put like a hard guard and say, no PO, no pay, right?
Yeah.
So that will, that can make it that make you confident that there are not going to be any pays without POs. But what it's not going to help you with, to Jonathan's point, is how many of those purchase requests might come early enough so you can actually use the spend under management to manage the spend and try to reduce it, right? If it comes after the fact, it's not useful. If it comes like at the last mile, it's not useful. Yeah. So really, there's no way around understanding that the requesters or the stakeholders, they have what I call personal ROI. It's a different ROI than your company ROI. And there's not one single ROI. I think someone in the chat also mentioned kind of like looking at the end, looking what all the different
yes.
This is to me connects to that all same point that every person in the team and out in the company, they have their own priorities and needs. And so when we want to give them a better experience, it is actually a way for us to get higher adoption and understand where they are and what are the things that they want to do and what are the ways that we want to have them go through. So, a stupid, simple to understand example is that, and even if you've never done it yourself, you can easily understand it. If I have a website and I want someone to buy something or just give me their email address for for an email newsletter, if I put form with 20 questions, or if I put a form with one question, what do you think would convert better? Right. So it's the same example. Like there's obviously both sides are interested in the situation. Yeah. Right. But one way would cause people to not follow through, and one way would cause them to follow through. And so if someone comes to procurement and asks for help with sourcing or want to purchase something, whether it's a commodity or a service or software, the complexity changes drastically between different categories. Yeah. But that's our problem as a procurement, that's not the end user problem. The end user just, they don't know. They don't even know. They're just asking sometimes the questions. What is the budget cap for, like limit for me to get approval, that I need to get approval from an executive, for example? They just ask a question. Obviously behind that question there's a purchase waiting. Obviously, how do I guide that person through a process that actually feels valuable to them, so next time they're not going to try to go around the process, they're going to come to the process because the process actually brings them value. And to me, and I said a lot of words, but the only important word at the end of the day is resolution. I believe that stakeholders and employees, they don't care actually about the experience being pretty just for the sake of being pretty. They don't care about it being easy for the sake of being easy. They care about resolution. How fast can you resolve my issue, and how efficient was that from what I had to do, right? If I request a refund in my DoorDash because I had an issue, all the questions they ask doesn't matter unless at the end of the answer is we credited your account with X amount of dollars. That's the only ways I'm gonna give them the thumbs up. You know what I mean? It's really about the resolution. So the experience is a vehicle to get resolution faster, to get all the information that we need in order to resolve the request, but in a way that keeps people coming back and quote unquote convert to use our process versus not using it.
Yeah. Well, and I do think that's interesting, and it does connect well. It's a question from Renee that we have in the chat. And I actually think she makes a great point, because she's asking about, sure, intake. So you think about the beginning, but then thinking through all the different stakeholder groups that are touched by that and where you're trying to have people end up. To go back to your example, Sagi, it's sort of like even having that one question intake form to get someone's email address for a newsletter. If you don't have a plan for how you're going to use their email address and the value you're going to give them in return, you've sort of put the cart before the horse. And so even to get intake done well, you still have to have thought through that whole process. And as we start to sort of wind down our conversation, I think, to Renee's point and to some of the things we've talked about, let's try to make this practical. We can talk about orchestration, we can talk about P2P and ERP, but what does it ultimately end up looking like and delivering? And so this is why we knew we wanted to set aside some time for case examples, sort of observing intake orchestration in the wild. Jonathan, let me come to you first. Are there any examples you can share of where intake orchestration came in and made a process difference, made compliance easier, delivered additional ROI? How does this actually play out in practice beyond being sort of another piece of conceptual technology we might add to a tech stack?
Yeah, and I think the intake orchestration piece is still a little bit difficult because it is still a little bit of a newer technology being utilized within procurement. But when I've seen these kind of implementations go well, even if it's a very sophisticated intake, a lot of times you can have a lot less maverick buying, improved CSAT scores, cycle time, spend influence. So there's a lot of benefits if it's done correctly. If it's not, look, it is just going to be another tool. So change management is also obviously going to be extremely important. And I think one of the biggest skills procurement needs, going further, today and into the future, is just the ability to influence, right? You have to have the influencing ability to get people to want to change, to actually realize a lot of these benefits. So I'll say this, it's a quicker case study, but one of my clients, a top 5 asset manager, they had a huge intake issue. The orchestration piece was obvious, but honestly, they had a big issue because they had 26 different ways that they could interact with procurement.
Wow.
That was ERPs, suites, there was SharePoint, there was emails. I mean, it was all over the place, and nobody could figure out where anything was in the process. And the amount of tactical work this team was doing was it was unbelievable. And they were able to get this down to a single instance where everyone knew how to interact with procurement. And sometimes that was, there's abilities to now interact just through Slack. If they wanted to interact with you through Slack, they could interact with you through Slack. So just the customizable way that they were able to be flexible with their and very user friendly, adoption was way higher than any implementation that they had really ever done. And all the benefits that I just mentioned actually came to fruition. So it was very successful, very quick, but change management was there. Some of the things that you need to have in place in order to make a successful transformation was there. But that was really a big issue for them. So company, multiple different ways, have no real idea how to interact with procurement. This was one way that they solved it. And then that transparency on the back end was also solved.
Yeah. And I certainly know firsthand, you can have the best solution in the world. Doesn't actually matter what it does. If nobody uses it, I absolutely guarantee there will be zero ROI, right? Doesn't matter. Like, you can ask nice, you can have a great rollout. If people don't adopt it and absorb it into their normal workflows, it doesn't matter how great it is. You're not going to get any benefit. And Sagi, when we think about those benefits and we combine it with the idea of user experience or procurement experience, again, one of the things procurement hears all the time, it takes too long. So I want to hear from you, not just about some specifics, maybe some case examples, but before you do, I would love to have you speak to the speed piece. How are cycle times affected? I mean, to me, those are the things. I bet if you went to most internal buyers or stakeholders and said, would you rather have it be perfect and take longer, or have it be, we're doing the best we can with process, but boy, does it fly along. I bet you people would put more emphasis on that visibility into the process plus speed. But can you give us any specifics around the acceleration impact that intake orchestration can have?
Yeah. So first, people like numbers. So I can tell that, from what we've seen with our customers, it's pretty consistent around 50%. So if it was 2 weeks or 20 days on average before you put the sort of the intake orchestration in, it's now 7 days. And but to understand how this type of improvement is possible, it's sort of first principle to kind of try and understand where are things, why does it take 20 days, right? Where do things fall through? And what we've seen, and I think would make a lot of sense for most people, is first of all, a lot of the issues are actually us people, trying to context switch and prioritize between different things. And that happens across the process. So first, just collecting the right information. So people get confused, they feel on the wrong thing. You need to go back and understand, why did they write this? Everyone's saying that everything is urgent. So inability to actually have one place to, Jonathan said very, very smartly that if you have multiple places that people come in, you want to make that more clear. Okay, you can talk to us through Slack, you can talk to us through email, you can talk to us through P2P or whatever. But even then, you have now 3, so like they all need to funnel to the same place for you to actually be able to prioritize just the justification of the business case and so on. So this is on the front end. And then obviously when it comes to the stakeholders, approvals and understanding how early were you actually involved in the funnel, do you have the right context to do that, and so on. So, to try to kind of hit on the solution part too, when you're able to connect to all the existing information, and that's where technology comes in, that's where you can actually leverage technology, is that you don't have to ask so many questions. You can ask less questions, and less questions, A, save time for the people that needs to answer those questions, but B, save mistakes, right? Because the information is already somewhere. So for example, if you just tell me the vendor that you're working with, I can obviously come and find everything. Who's the procurement person that worked with that vendor in the past? Like, who knows, who has all the context, be able to write it to the right place up front. If I can ask you some leading questions to then decide what path you need to go in. If it's a software purchase, is very different than if it's a marketing consultant purchase. If it has AI, which is the big things today, then you might need to go through a route to have InfoSec and privacy controls that you don't need if you're doing something that is simpler. So a lot of those points within the intake help, but then the orchestrate is what takes this then to the rest of the organization. So I'm kind of like, I look at the chat questions as well, kind of touch on that as well. If you want InfoSec, for example, to also be faster, you need to go to them. So instead of, sending them an email notification from a P2P saying, hey, you have something on you that you need to approve, orchestration can help you automatically create the InfoSec ticket and have only the information that InfoSec needs. But the orchestration layer can also help you collaborate between all the different stakeholders in one place. So there's a real aspect of, if I got dropped a ticket, if I'm legal, if I'm InfoSec, or if I'm the procurement team themselves, and I got dropped a ticket, someone needs something from me, 50% of the time we found is 25 on the front and 25 at the end of just trying to figure out what this thing is.
Yeah.
Why is that important? And if you can reduce that, then you reduce the end of it. And then the last thing I would say is, sometimes resolution means deflection. So many requests doesn't actually needs to be a request. Some requests are just frequently asked questions. Some requests can be automatically solved, whether it's by pointing them into some self-serve, like a catalog buying or whatever it is, or just having like a fast lane, path that you can define that if this and this and this and this and this happens, then this auto approves, just go ahead and do that. And again, that's where the connectivity to the rest of the systems is important, because if I can know your budget and how much of the budget you've already used, if I know your role, right, if I connect to your HR system and I know that you're a VP, then I can maybe say, okay, you're a VP, you're trying to buy something for $1,000, just go ahead. Obviously fill the information. This will go as a purchase order, but it will be auto approved and it will just be fast lane. So there's a lot of power in the ability to create those different swim lanes and create those different connectivities that very quickly, actually, we've seen within a couple months, people start to see the immediate result of things that get resolved within 1 minute. Seriously, because it automatically was answered, versus something that should have taken 5 days just a week before.
And I do think that really does connect sort of the idea of intake orchestration with procurement experience. Because if you think of your example with, regardless of what the answer is, but the step is deflection to send people into some other process or channel, that answer is already known by someone somewhere, and connecting the person who has made that request with that piece of information and what their next step should be, the faster that can be, even if procurement's not ultimately directly delivering anything for them, that is still an incredible way to improve the experience that person has had, because they think, right, I needed something, I went a place, I got a quick answer to go to another place and get exactly what I needed. I actually think there's a lot of ways that procurement can be less hands-on, ironically enough, and actually deliver both more value, more empowerment, and a better overall experience. And so I think that's a great way to look at some of these workflow tools that we can be implementing. It's not always about filling in a million forms and getting some intake form to me. It might actually be about routing people to other places, but as quickly as possible, so they don't feel like they had to stand in that line longer than was absolutely necessary.
And by the way, just to kind of finish that point, because we didn't even get to talk about AI, but this is where I think AI actually changed the game, because I can answer a question without it even, a complex question, without ever showing you a form, if I can talk in a natural language. Behind the scenes, you have to have the orchestration engine, because otherwise the AI doesn't have the knowledge of what needs to be done, right? So I a lot of time think about it as a different, it's just like a iteration from what a form is, and then into something that is more natural feeling. But similarly, this is where when you think about the the leverage of technology, the leverage of large language models, and what we now everyone are referring to as AI, but that's really the big jump that happened in the last year or so, is that it can understand people. It just talk to you. It's just language, right? It can understand language the way people do, is what I meant, right? So you can actually have a conversation or have a request in a very natural, very unstructured, very piecemeal type of message that doesn't fit a form, but the LLMs and the AI can actually extract everything that is to extract out of it and then fill in the gaps. And so it creates a situation where, to get to Jonathan's point, if you ask someone from some procurement something in Slack channel or an email, which is a very common use case for our customers, for example, but you have that orchestration behind it that connects to that Slack channel with AI that can understand what the person says, all of a sudden a question can then be answered immediately through knowledge base or FAQ, or it can be routed into a couple question in place to fast track, or it can be routed into, okay, this is a more complex situation, I need a lot more information from you, here's a form that I already pre-filled with what you gave me so far, but I need you to finish it up so I can go forward with it. So that type of idea, and not to mention then later down the stream, summarizing it for other stakeholders. And so, taking complex data and using AI to summarize it, okay, this is the, synopsis of what you should care about, but that is like almost like a fairy dust feel sometimes, but it is true because it elevates the output of the entire process to make the experience even more natural, because it's just language at that point.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, maybe let me wrap here on one last question about AI. Jonathan, I'll ask you this, and then Sagi, I'll come back to you for sort of the final word. We've talked, and Richard's asked the question, which I think, Sagi, you addressed very nicely in your comments just now, about how can procurement use AI to better understand workflows and user experience. I actually think this goes back to some of what we were talking about before, about sort of the consumerization of the procurement process and the procurement tech that has to go with it. And Jonathan, my sense, not being an AI expert of any sort, is that there's a lot more AI and machine learning embedded in the systems that we use every day than we have any idea about. And so indirectly, those little tweaks and usability improvements are affecting our expectations on the consumer side in a way that will be at work before we realize it. From an AI perspective, or generally procurement sort of tech-based experience overall, any advice you have about points of friction procurement needs to be on the lookout for, little customizations and things that we can do to make it easier, make it go better, when we really do think about how the consumer expectation comes into buying activity done at work? Where should procurement be focused from a process or tech perspective?
Yeah, I think procurement needs to be very careful with the definitions of what AI is, what generative AI is, what LLMs are. I think they need to be very careful when evaluating any solution, whether that's upstream, downstream, supporting. They need to be very careful of making sure that somebody's not trying to bill AI as just maybe some kind of smart automation or RPA. Chatbots really are AI driven. And I think it comes down to a lot of, what data are these AI and Gen AI models learning off of? Because an LLM that's using OpenAI, ChatGPT type of information is not going to be providing you with procurement specific information from that lens. So you need to make sure that the models that are being trained on all of these technologies are actually going to be useful for procurement, because if not, we're comparing apples and oranges here. So I think that's probably something that I would take away from, and not just, don't go rushing into implement AI for the sake of AI. Make sure that there's a concrete use case behind it. Start small, smart with pilots, and make sure that it's actually going to solve some kind of business challenge. I have spoken to a couple of CPOs over the past couple of months, and they're just like, 2024, we're implementing something with AI. I was like, that's not what I said. I heard what I said. That is not what I said. So make sure you're actually solving something and not just implementing it for the sake of implementing it.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And Sagi, I'll come to you for final words. Anything that you would add to what Jonathan just shared around this whole like bringing AI in, but not doing it just for the sake of saying you've done it?
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. It's we're all old enough to remember the iPhone, the post iPhone age, right, where everything was mobile, and the feeling was, oh, this needs to be mobile first. This needs to be mobile.
Yep.
Everything was, and very. It didn't take long. Maybe like 3-4 years after that, we started to realize as an industry that some things are clearly needs to be mobile first because there's a value of it being in your pocket on the go.
Yeah.
And some things are better stay in a desktop environment. And so the situation with AI is not different. It's really come back to that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a terrific observation. And I also happen to think it's one that's going to age well. I think that's going to make a lot more sense at the end of 2024 than a lot of the things that are very flowery and enthusiastic about AR that are being said this early in the year. So with that, Sagi, Eliyahu, Jonathan Fehring, I want to thank you both for your time and for sharing your expertise today. I want to thank everybody who joined us live, who put comments into the chat, as well as to thank everybody who watches this later on demand. We're glad you found this conversation. So with that, I will go ahead and wrap the event. Thank you all for being with us. And of course, have a great rest of your day.